Good afternoon, Alpha and Happy New Year. My name is Catherine Manjoma, and I am honored to be here with you today as we launch our first 2021 Alpha Life episode series of the year. I would like to start by giving a special thank you to our partner, American Express, and for their commitment to the Latino community. American Express is a Fortune 500 company with over 64,000 employees globally, headquartered in New York with operating centers in Phoenix, Sunrise, Florida, Salt Lake City, plus a thousand of virtual employees across the country and the world. And they are hiring, so don't forget to apply. Today, we have a conversation focused on the importance of authenticity in the workplace. Please note you will be able to ask questions in the comments section. We encourage you to send them throughout the show. They will be answered towards the end of the conversation. Now, a little bit about myself. My Alpha journey began in 2015 when I co-founded the Inter-American Student Chapter in Puerto Rico. As a first-generation Colombian, first to go to college and being legally emancipated at the age of 15, I felt like an outsider until I joined Alpha. I met very successful, highly motivated individuals, passionate about giving back with very similar backgrounds. I found mentors and some of my best friends. Alpha became part of who I am, and I wanted to pay it forward. Once I graduated, I joined the Alpha Puerto Rico chapter, where I served as a director of events, and when I transferred to Houston, I found my Alpha Familia. This confirmed to me the power of our network. I served as director of events for 2 years and now have the honor of serving as the Alpha Houston chapter president, where I have the privilege of bringing people together to make an impact in our community. I am a senior associate in the Houston Cyber Privacy and Forensics practice at PwC and co-lead the Latino Inclusion Network in Houston. Authenticity to me means bringing my whole self to work. my passions, my culture, my experiences, which gives me a profound sense of belonging. It was important to me to find a company that values diversity, inclusion, and equity efforts. Now, I would like to introduce our special speaker, Rosie Perez. Rosie Perez is a Senior Vice President and CFO for the Global Commercial Services at American Express. She is also a member of the Finance Leadership Team. Throughout her 12 years at American Express, Rosie has developed broad experiences across the finance and proven her passion for taking on new challenges. She has held a variety of roles within the finance organization, including American Express Global Consumer Card Services, where she partnered with the marketing and product organizations to advance global product and partnership strategy, including renewables of co-brand partnerships, as well as optimized investments. In 2016, Rosie spent time in Toronto as LFO of the company's Canada's consumer business and as a member of the Canada executive team responsible for the overall financial management of the market. She is now a member of the board of Amex Bank of Canada. Prior to this, Rosie spent more than 4 years in the corporate planning organization as director and vice president. In her last corporate planning role, Rosie was responsible for leading the team that created and delivered bi-weekly presentations on American Express's results, microeconomic trends, and the competitive landscape to American Express Operating Committee and other senior constituents, as well as ad hoc financial communications to the board of directors and regulators. Rosie started her career at American Express as a manager in the open and consumer finance teams. Before joining American Express, Rosie was an auditor at Ernst & Young. She graduated with a bachelor's in economics from the Wharton School of Business at the University of Pennsylvania and an MBA from Harvard Business School. Rosie, I am confident that we can all learn a great deal from your vast experience and education. I would like to welcome Rosie. Rosie, thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule to be with us here today. Let's start with an icebreaker. It's a new year and many people have New Year's resolutions. Do you have any resolutions for 2021?
Well, first of all, Catherine, thank you for having me. Thank you for the amazingly long bio. And thank you for everybody who's tuning in. So New Year's resolutions. I've learned the hard way over the course of my life that New Year's resolutions just don't work for me, or maybe I don't work for New Year's resolutions. But my father and I, every single year, have given up sugar for the first few months of the year, which I'll tell you, for two Cubans who really love their flan, is very hard. So let's call that my New Year's resolution. We're in the middle of it right now, and it's a struggle, I'm not gonna lie.
Oh man, I believe you, that can't be easy. What have you been doing for fun during the past year with COVID limitations?
So fun has become definitely a different definition. You know, I don't know if this is fun necessarily, but I live in an apartment in New Jersey, so I feel very kind of cooped in all the time. And so I've been trying to spend a lot of time outside. I've started running outside more. I've traded my commute in the morning, since I don't go to work anymore, to taking my dog to the park and playing catch in the morning, which is a really fun way to start your day. So I'm not sure I would define that as fun necessarily, but it has saved my sanity being cooped up in the apartment for the past 11 months.
Well, that's wonderful. It sounds like it's gotten you out of your apartment as well, so that's great. Okay, Rosie, can you please tell us about yourself and how you got into being such a successful woman at a Fortune 500 company, and tell us about your role at American Express?
Of course, of course. So you were so kind with your bio, so I won't repeat it, but you know, maybe from a personal level, like I said, I come from a Cuban family. I was born here in the US, born in New Jersey, where I currently live with my husband and my dog. Like I think a lot of maybe immigrants and exiles who are kind of looking for a better life for their kids, my family was very focused on education. So I went to college and to graduate school for business. I don't know if when I was 16 years old, I actually knew what business was. I don't know if you did when you were, you know, deciding what to do with your life, but here I am so many years later. I joined American Express right after graduate school. I've been here for the last 13 years. I've had about 10 different jobs within Amex in those 13 years. So I've moved around quite a bit. I've had jobs that are US focused. I've had jobs, like you said, I spent some time in Canada. I had jobs that were super focused on the models and negotiating with our partners. And I've had jobs where I sort of look at things from a 50,000-foot view. I ran our investor relations group for a bit. So a bunch of different roles, which I thought was a really great way of getting to know the company and the industry and getting a really good finance education at work, which has always been really important to me. So now I am the CFO of one of our business units at American Express. And the business unit that I'm the CFO for is the commercial services organization. So it's basically the part of the company that works with small businesses. So many of you might have heard of Small Business Saturday. We invented Small Business Saturday many years ago. So we serve small businesses and then also like the largest of large corporations that many of you that are listening in today might work for. So I'm the CFO for that organization. That basically means that I partner with the head, the president of that organization. I partner with her leadership team. I partner with my team. And together we sort of manage the financials and grow our business. So that's what I do today. You were very kind to say that I was a successful woman at a Fortune 500 company. I would say maybe a few things that I really focused on throughout my career. I can't say that I always had a career path, which I'm happy to talk about later if anybody's interested in career planning. But I have focused on a few things. The first one is always looking to challenge myself. I love jobs that I think are really hard and that make me nervous. Those are the ones that I kind of gravitate to. The second is I've been really focused on proving that I can do a bunch of different things, which is probably why I've taken so many different roles. And then the last thing, really focus on building relationships, right? Driving results is really important, but building relationships and finding mentors and sponsors is equally as important. So I think those three things have been really helpful.
Definitely. Thank you, Rosie, for that and for sharing your journey. I kind of wanted to go back to something that you mentioned because I feel like many students and professionals during the sometimes our parents didn't talk to us about going to college or to business school. Like, how did you determine that, and any advice you can give to them?
Yeah, I guess I would say that you should go for what you're interested in, and it will sort of sort itself out, right? Which sounds a bit of a cliche, and it sounds like I'm kind of dodging your question a little bit, Catherine. But the reason that I decided to go to school and kind of concentrate in finance and accounting was because I thought math was fun. And I took a few accounting classes, and I was sort of the strange person that really loved accounting classes in college. And so that's sort of what I did. And from there, I found something else that was interesting. And from there, I found something else that was interesting. And for me, that's really what is going to make you successful. If you find the intersection of what you think is interesting and where there's opportunity, you're going to be able to be really successful. From a career path perspective, when I joined American Express 13 years ago, I had no idea what investor relations was. I didn't know that I would move to Canada and spend a year there as the CFO. You never know what opportunities are going to happen. So I'm much more of the look for the opportunities, look what's interesting to you, and sort of jump on it, and you'll find your way.
I love that. That's great advice. Thank you. And what I'm taking from that as well is have flexibility both in the university and then, when you go into your career. So great advice. Thank you. So today's topic is authenticity. Can you please tell us about what authenticity means to you?
Sure. So you talked a little bit about authenticity in your intro, and I have to say, I love your definition. I really agree with your definition of authenticity. It's very much to me about knowing yourself, knowing what you bring to the table, and showing up honestly, and not sort of superficially. Really, the underlying sort of values, your background, your identity. That's the things that make you uniquely you. And knowing them and bringing them to the table, to me, is what authenticity is about. So that's how I think about it. I also think when you're talking about authenticity, it's important to say what authenticity is, and it's important to say what authenticity is not. And for me, and I'd love sort of your view in the comments, or Catherine, authenticity is not necessarily about style, right? You can have different styles in different situations and still be authentic to you. So if you're somebody that really loves connecting with people, you can do that. And in some situations, give a big speech, right? Or do what we're doing right now in front of who knows how many people. Or you can just do it quietly and have one-on-one conversations where you're listening more than you're talking, right? Your style can change depending on the situation, and you can stay true to who you are. It also means that different people can have different styles and still do well and be authentic to them. The other thing that I think is really important is that you can remain authentic and evolve at the same time. So like being authentic doesn't mean you're going to be the same person for all 50 years of your career, right? As you go through your career, you're going to learn, you're going to meet people, you're going to mess up. In my case, you're going to mess up a lot, and you might change your perspective, right? And that's okay. That's growing, right? You can remain authentic and still grow as a person. And so that's how I think about authenticity.
I love that. Thank you, Rosie. Was there ever a time where you felt that you could not be your authentic self? And so how did you overcome that?
Yeah, I think that a lot of people feel this, but I remember going to college. You said, Catherine, you were a first-generation college student, right? I was too, and I remember going to school and immediately feeling like everybody was so different from me. After the first few weeks of people talking about, the prices of their homes and their cars and their parents' jobs, I remember saying, like, I don't belong here. And that really makes it hard to be authentic. It makes it really hard to bring your full self to the table, right? And so I think a lot of people feel that way in situations that are new, whether it be school or whether it be starting a new job or moving somewhere, right? I think it's definitely a common theme. Two things that worked for me that I now think about in every other situation when I feel that way. The first is small wins, I think really help. And I'm going to steal something that your CEO actually said. So I was having a conversation with Damien a few months ago, and he gave this advice, which I thought was super powerful. And so now I'm just going to steal it and give it to everybody who's watching. He suggested that everybody go back into their life and do a roadmap or a timeline of their lives. And go back and really think about, what are those times that you were really successful? What are those times where you made specific decisions? What are those stories in your life? And when you go back and you connect the dots, you really start to learn, what do you bring to the table, right? What makes you uniquely you? And I think doing that, as well as, getting some wins under your belt and celebrating those wins, gives you the confidence that, yeah, you can hang here, right? You can hang here. And that gives you the confidence to kind of be authentically yourself. The other thing that I think is really helpful is finding some allies, right? In the case of school, it might be finding a group of friends. In the case of work, it might be, your team at work or finding some colleagues. There's nothing like finding a group of people with, shared background, maybe shared interests, that you feel more comfortable bringing yourself into and using that as a launch pad for bringing your authenticity elsewhere. And so that's why organizations like Alpha are amazing, right? That's why employee networks, I think, are really powerful, because Alpha is a group of shared interests and shared backgrounds and shared goals, and you're all here to support each other. And I think that's a really powerful thing to help drive authenticity.
Thank you. I couldn't agree more. And for me, Alpha has been that for me, where I was able to find of people with similar stories and backgrounds, and therefore I didn't feel like I was the only one. But there's so many, and so many are passionate and successful and motivated, and definitely like empowered. So thank you for saying that. And then I also wanted to share, because you mentioned belonging, and I think thinking about authenticity, you also have to think about belonging. So I wanted to share a quote from one of my favorite authors, Brene Brown. She defines belonging as an innate human desire to be a part of something larger than us. Because this yearning is so primal, we often try to acquire it by fitting in and seeking approval, which are not only hollow substitutes for belonging, but often barriers to it. True belonging only happens when we present our authentic and perfect selves to the world. And I love how you also described how to be authentic, like how do you discover like what that means to you. So thank you also for sharing that. What are some ways that American Express has created a safe space for their employees to be their most authentic selves?
Yeah, so I love that term safe space. I think it's a really good definition of what companies should be doing. It's creating an environment where people feel like they can be their authentic selves and bring their full selves to work. So maybe I'd say a few things here for people that are kind of thinking about their own work or where they might want to work, how we think about it at American Express. First of all, I think this is something that is really important to the company. It starts with the tone from the top, I think, as it usually does, right? Leadership is super important. And the ideas of diversity and equity and inclusion are really top of mind for our CEO and our leadership team. We just had a town hall, an employee town hall today with all of the employees, and our CEO reiterated the importance of inclusion and making sure that we had a culture where people feel like their voices are heard and they belong, right? And that really sets the tone from the top, and that helps trickle down to the rest of the organization, which I think is really, really important. There's a few things I guess I would mention here. One, I talked about employee networks. I think employee networks are really powerful. We have about a dozen employee networks. I think over 100 chapters globally, because we are a global company. And they're all supported by senior leadership at the company. And they're a really fantastic way of, again, finding people with shared backgrounds, building relationships, finding mentors that can help you navigate through the organization. And when you have a group of people like that, you feel more comfortable bringing in your authentic self. And then, you know, there's a few other things that I would say maybe around the topic of authenticity. There are just some examples, right? So we started what we call self-ID, where people can confidentially or voluntarily identify themselves. They can identify gender, they can identify sexual orientation, ethnicity, confidentially and voluntarily. And what that does is allow the company to really understand the diversity on the college base. It allows us to tailor our programs. And really importantly for me, it's a signal that we as the company really care about serving the needs of all of our employees. So again, there's a lot around tone and signal that I think is really important, as well as all of the structural things that we do.
That's amazing. And then there's the accountability of that part that American Express is holding themselves accountable for diversity and inclusion. That's wonderful.
Right. Yeah. Yep.
Okay, so then I did want to share one of my personal stories because I think it is important from what you're saying as well with the programs and everything that American Express has to offer. So early on in my career, I would go to work, and then after work, you know, was my passion for diversity and inclusion efforts with Alpha. Once I started at PwC, I felt a true sense of belonging where I was able to bring my whole self to work. For me, it felt like those two separate worlds finally came together, and through that, I was adding value to the company. So I think that's what the importance of the programs within the company and diversity and inclusion efforts, and like that bringing your authentic self to work and actually feeling like you belong there is so important. How does American Express promote a sense of belonging?
Yeah, I think that's so powerful, right? I mean, the story that you just told is super powerful because you found a place that not only doesn't frown on your values and your passions, it actually helps you, right, execute on them. And if I had to guess, that's one of the reasons, despite the busyness of your job, right, that you're super committed to PwC and that you've stayed there for as long as you have, right? Their ability to help you execute on your values. And so I think that's a super powerful example of why belonging is really important and why creating a sense of belonging is really important, right? It drives engagement. As it relates to Amex, you know, a lot of the things that I said around authenticity and belonging are also applied to this. So, you know, employee networks are really helpful. Representation is really important. You know, it's only part of the battle. It's not the whole battle, but it's a really important part of it, right? It's a lot easier to feel like you can bring your authentic self to work. It's a lot easier to feel like you belong when you look around and there are people like you, right? Or when you look up and there are people like you. And so representation is really important, and we're very committed in recruiting strategies, hiring strategies, to help enhance representation across our company. Again, not the only thing, but a really important part of it, I think. As it relates specifically to belonging, that's one of the areas that we've dialed up. So actually last year, 2020, pre-COVID, we started rolling out a series of actual belonging workshops. So we started in person when we actually saw each other in person, with the top, you know, few hundred senior leaders of the company, and had in-person workshops around what is belonging, why is it important, how can you help instill belonging in your team, and we focused on 3 different areas of belonging that I thought were really fascinating. One, belonging when you're new, belonging when you're underrepresented, and belonging when you're not at your best, which, you know, in hindsight was like the perfect pillar for 2020, because there's a lot of us that were not at our best during 2020. But we really focused on, in those 3 situations, it's harder to feel a sense of belonging. So then what do we do as a company and as a leadership team to help create that environment? And it's really interesting because when you're in those trainings, you sort of take a step back and you realize, well, almost everybody here has been in one of those situations, right? Everybody knows what it's like to feel like you don't quite belong. And so they were really powerful to build awareness. They were really powerful to give some strategies on how best to instill a sense of belonging. And we've since rolled it out across the organization to all of the people leaders who are really responsible for, you know, of course, setting the environment on their team. So that's something we've really dialed up, and I think we'll continue to dial up. Outside of that, you mentioned you work in I&D. I do I&D work too. I'm actually the sponsor, the executive sponsor of our I&D efforts in the finance organization. And so I work with a lot of people on this, and we spend a lot of time thinking about how do we drive a sense of belonging? What are the things we do to build a sense of community across our global organization, because we have people in a ton of markets? How do we think about mentorship programs? I love mentorship programs. I think they're really important to build a sense of belonging. You know, when you feel like somebody who knows the organization, who has been successful in the organization, is there to have your back and is there to help you succeed, that really, in my opinion, helps drive a sense of belonging. So we do a number of different things across this, and that's just a flavor of the things that we're focused on.
That's really powerful, and not just that the individuals and people that are at levels are willing to invest their time in helping, but also the company to implement these programs. And I love that you mentioned that they broke out belonging for 4 different categories, and one that shows that they care. So it's not only like one, you know, flat tone of belonging, but individually crafted for specific audiences. That's very powerful. Thank you for sharing that. Okay, so now we're going to shift a little bit the topic. So one of our strategies at Alpha is wealth creation through strategic and tactical efforts to educate, support, and provide the necessary knowledge and tools to enable participants in their journey to financial freedom. What benefits does American Express have to support and help your colleagues achieve financial freedom, and how do you think this allows you to bring your authentic self to work?
So first of all, I think that it's amazing that Alpha has this as one of your strategies. You know, even in a professional environment, it's hard to figure out how to navigate, you know, your financial future. It's hard to think about wealth creation. You know, friends that are going to medical school and law school and business school still have a hard time figuring it out. It's a complicated topic. And so kudos to Alpha for making this a focus area. I think particularly for Latinos, in many cases, our families, ourselves came to this country to help get a better financial future. And so this is really important. So kudos to you guys for doing it. As I think about it, as I think about working for my company and maybe to help folks think about it for themselves, you know, for me, the center, maybe the first step of wealth creation, as you think about how your company helps you, is pay. All right, it's the first step to building wealth. And so one of the things that Amex has done in 2019, we got to pay parity, which is no statistical difference, significant difference across genders and ethnicities as it relates to pay. In 2020, we took it one step further and we're now at 100% pay equity, which is to say no difference between genders and race and ethnicities in the US. And that's, I think, really important, right? It all starts with pay. You want to feel like you work for a company that is paying you equitably. So to me, that's the first step. But I think that's kind of the center. And then around it are a series of things like benefits and education that sort of help round that out, right? And so by benefits, I mean, of course, health benefits, which are really important, but also things like tuition assistance, right? We give tuition assistance for people that want to go back to school. Family planning, we give financial assistance as it relates to adoption, as an example. There's a host of education programs there to help people navigate how to pay for their kids' college, which we all know is super expensive and really complicated. You know, we have financial consultants, actually. So if you need help creating a financial roadmap for yourself and your family, we offer the ability to talk to financial consultants to help you. And so it's kind of pay at the center, right? You need to feel like you're paid equitably. And then there's a host of things around it, you know, that you would consider, and I named a few of the things that Amex has as you think about kind of a company supporting you in that wealth creation space.
I think that is really important information, Rosie, and thank you for sharing that. For all our students and professionals watching this, these are some of the things that they consider and we all consider while applying. I feel like before, as first generations, we thought like we were very lucky to get a job offer, but these are now things that, you know, diversity and inclusion efforts, pay equity and things like that. So thank you very much for sharing that information and our students and professionals to consider when applying for a job. Rosie, as we think about authenticity at a broader level, how do you think bringing your authentic and holistic self to work adds value to American Express culture?
So gosh, how doesn't it add value? You know, I think maybe I'll sort of say it in two ways. One is business results. I fundamentally believe that when people feel like they can be themselves and their authentic selves, that we just get better business results. You know, many of us are kind of in the knowledge business, right, in the ideas business. And so you need people that come in with ideas, that have creative energy, that can push back, right, that give their perspective. And if you feel like you have to cover up a part of yourself, you just don't have the energy. You're holding back those ideas. And so being able to bring your authentic self to work feeling like you belong, I think ultimately ends up creating an environment that has more ideas, more pushback, more debate, gets to better answers, and therefore you just get better business results. The other part of it, I think, is culture, and just it's more fun, it's more engaging when you're around a bunch of people that feel like they can be themselves, when you're around differences, right? It's just more fun, I think. It also helps build connections. We've all worked with people over the course of our lives where you feel like they're holding back, where you feel like they're kind of fake. You know, that's not fun, right? You're not building a real relationship. I imagine if I walked around pretending to kind of be a fancy executive all the time who knew everything and was perfect, which is absolutely not true, I wouldn't be able to build relationships with my team, right? I wouldn't have people that would be willing to check me when I need to be checked, and would be willing to give their perspective. And to me, that's what a real relationship is about. So I think that's business results. I think that it's culture. It's a whole lot of value that this drives. You know, 2020 was a perfect year for this, right? Because we were all sort of looking at each other's homes through the screen. We're looking at each other's spouses and kids. My dog's barking during every single meeting, right? you get a real slice of people's lives. And then you have a whole subsegment of people that were going through challenges, like real challenges in a challenging year. And all of that kind of exposed our real lives to each other. And I think really built authentic connections. And so despite, how challenging the environment has been, of course, I think hopefully what it did was at least build deeper and deeper trust and deeper bonds and relationships across people, because we almost had no choice to be our authentic selves.
Yeah, I agree. I know I was in New York. My family lives in New York, and I was with my nephews, and they weren't letting me work. There were the three of them trying to play with me, and they don't understand the concept of working. So you can't really explain that to them. And I think, yeah, like I saw that with my colleagues, and I came to a point where it's okay. It's okay if the kids are crying. It's okay if the dogs are barking. People are yelling. It's kind of part of our everydays, and it's real and authentic. And I thought that was honestly one of the beauties of COVID, that it helped us, learn more about each other and, know that it's okay.
Exactly, and it's fun, right? I loved meeting people's kids. I loved meeting people's spouses. It's just more fun that way.
Definitely. Okay, so now we're going to go into our Q&A. So everyone, please drop your questions into the comment section. Rosie, I know we already have a few here for you. The first one is, in order to be authentic, you have to be vulnerable. And how do you overcome that fear?
Yeah, that's a great point. And we didn't talk about that. So it's a great question, Catherine, and I'd love for you to share your vantage point too, since you've been so accomplished in your career at a much younger age than I am. I would say that vulnerability is an important piece of it. And it is hard because you want to be able to balance vulnerability and authenticity and being professional and making an impact, right? And so what I would say is always think about what impact you want to make. And then when you want to sort of dial up the vulnerability a little bit, I would maybe start with, think about specific areas where you can be vulnerable instead of kind of going all out at once and just being super transparent all the time. Think about what are the areas where you maybe want to dial it up, and then start there. And I think that'll help give you the confidence and kind of test how it works, and then increase it if you want to. And similarly, are there specific groups of people that maybe you can be more vulnerable with to kind of test it out, and then open it up from there? I always find that to be kind of the best advice for when you're trying new things.
I love that. Thank you, Rosie. No, I have to agree with you. I think in the beginning, when I was younger, sometimes I was a little ashamed, of maybe, being, Christian and being the first one to go to college and not having that advice. But I feel like you have to learn to accept yourself, right, to begin with, right, and be proud of your accomplishments, your family's accomplishments, who you are as a person, and that's going to help you overcome that fear. And I love that you said that, find a group first. And I feel like Alpha provides that, so your network within Alpha, your family, your friends, and share it with them, and then you go on from there. And it's true, you don't have to share everything. I know normally I'm a very reserved person, so you don't have to share everything. It could be specific things that you think are going to have a greater impact. I love the way you said it.
Yeah, and I think your point is so great, Catherine. I mean, I think you realize the more and more, at least, that I've gone through my career, everything in your background, I think, adds great value, right? I mean, the fact that we were first generation college students is fantastic. That adds tremendous value. That's something, to your point, to be super proud of. And I think, sort of following Damien's advice of going back through your life and thinking about what your story is and connecting the dots, you really start to realize what you bring to the table. And that, again, makes it easier to be authentic.
I love that. Okay, the next question is, what have been some of the biggest challenges you have faced in your career, and how have you overcome them?
It's a great question. I guess I would say it's a lot of the topics that we've been talking about today. I think as you progress throughout your career, maybe I should say, as I've progressed throughout my career, it's really been about sort of balancing who I am and what impact I want to have. And so, like, as an example, because it relates to authenticity, you know, I used to be of the mindset, and I'm sure a lot of people are, that being authentic is being honest, right? That is authentic to me. That's a value to me. You know, and that doesn't necessarily mean, although I thought it did at the time, to say whatever you want to say, however you want to say it, to whoever you want to say it at all times. And I had a boss actually sit me down and say, you know, Rosie, just so you know, not everybody needs your feedback about themselves every time, right? And at first I thought that he was sort of attacking my authenticity. He was asking me to not be myself. But I think it was a great learning because it really teaches you that you need to balance kind of who you are with the impact that you want to have, right? And it's that constant balance as you move throughout your career that I think is really important. So I think that is super relevant to our conversation.
Yeah. I think on that line, we have a question here from Estefania Herrera. She's asking, how do you bounce back to being your authentic self after resigning from a male-dominant industry you worked at for 16 years?
Wow. I bet you have some stories to tell. So I think that's great. So first of all, congratulations on the next step in your career. That's really exciting. You know, I guess I would say it goes back to reflection on what your values are, what's important to you, the times you've been successful. And if you think back, what happened? Like, what is the environment that made you successful? And when you start to kind of do that, you start to really think about what it is that you want in the future. So you left something that perhaps didn't align very well with your values or your authentic self. So think back to the times that you were your authentic self. Think back to the times that you were successful. What did that environment look like? And then go in that direction.
Wonderful. And around that same question, what was your biggest challenge as a Latina in your industry, and how did you overcome it?
That, you know what, it's probably exactly what I just said, right? I think that I'm not sure if this is because I'm a Latina or just because of an individual. You know, I think it's always about the perception of what I was, what was important to me, the values, and how I balance that with sort of making an impact and building credibility. So it's a constant balance. You know, it was really important to me. It always has been, and perhaps because I'm a Latina, to build credibility. And for me, that really manifests itself in getting some wins and driving results and being able to show that I can be successful in different environments. And that for me has been really, really helpful. And it also, quite honestly, the more you build credibility, particularly as a minority, regardless of whatever kind of minority you are, you know, the more you're able, I think, to be your authentic self. And so I think it's a lot of what I've said before, but I would add that I've been very focused on kind of taking on the tough assignments, on showing that I can do a host of different things in order to build that credibility, which, you know, unfortunately in many industries, right, is just harder to do when you're a minority.
Estefania says, thank you for your inspiration.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
And then we have another one here from Cydia Thomas. She said, it is so easy to cover to fit in, and oftentimes we don't know we are covering. Can you give us some advice around covering, and what can you do to make sure people don't feel they have to?
Yeah, that's really important. It's also, you know, it's concepts of code switching, right? Of sort of being one way in one person in one group and one way in one person in another group. You know, I would say a lot of the things that we just talked about, and Catherine, you know, you should jump into, I think, are really, really important. So one is find your allies, right? Find mentors that can help you where you feel comfortable that you don't necessarily have to cover, and that can be supportive of you in whatever environment you're in. So I've heard of people, and I try to do this myself, that when they're in meeting rooms with, a colleague, they'll say agree in advance that perhaps they'll support each other's ideas, right? So finding allies that can help you in your sort of journey to kind of uncover, I think are really, really important. And as a leader, I think it's really incumbent upon us to focus on that belonging, right? The thing that we talked about before, which is how do you make sure that you're asking for perspectives from everybody in the room? How do you make sure that you're encouraging debate? Are you asking people about sort of what they did over the weekend, and sort of encouraging personal stories to come out? Those are all of the things that I think leaders need to be really intentional about in driving the environment.
I think for me, the key for me has been mentors, allies, and advocates. I know sometimes like I don't feel comfortable like sharing certain things or like successes because I don't want to be like talking too much about myself or like putting sharing too much. But I know like if I share it with one of my directors or my partners, like they'll share it for me, and then that'll help me as well, and that'll like show what I'm doing, the work that I'm putting in. So I always feel like I found mentors throughout my journey who have pushed me to believe in myself, to do things that are outside of my norm, and that have made me kind of the person I am today.
Mentors are so critical. I always tell people that you should look for a boss or a leader or a mentor who's more ambitious for you than you are for yourself. And everybody should be super ambitious for themselves, but we all need that one person who just thinks the world of us, right? And really pushes us. And so that's exactly what you were talking about, Catherine. I think that's really, really important.
I think we have another one here. Okay, being comfortable in our. Oh, sorry. What was your biggest challenge as a Latina in your? Oh, I think we have that one covered.
Yeah, we covered that one. Thank you, Jennifer.
Thank you.
We covered that one. Good luck.
Okay, let's do Jenny Ramos. Being comfortable in our authenticity at work is such a positive thing, but is it possible for our authenticity to cross into the realm of unprofessionalism? And if so, how do you avoid this?
Yeah, that's exactly what I was talking about earlier. I think that's such a great question, and that's the challenge, right? I mean, authenticity is really important. Feeling like you can live your values and you know what's important to you, and that you're in an environment that's leveraging what you bring to the table is really important. You also need to balance that with the fact that what you say and how you act has an impact on the people around you. And you want to be thoughtful about what that impact is. And so you really need to be able to balance between living your values, being authentic, and making an impact. And you can do both. I think it just takes a lot of reflection. And that's why I say it's okay if your style changes based on situations, right? Because as long as you're being true to yourself, you don't need to be like Rosie was a few years ago and just say whatever kind of comes to your mind to whoever, right? You can still be honest and you can still get your point across, but you need to think about doing that in a way that gets to the impact that you want to have on the organization.
And we have another question from Fernando Sanchez. So he is saying, what are some of the best practices to keep in mind to avoid being too personal in the workplace and having good boundaries in place without sacrificing authenticity?
Yeah, that's another good one, right? This all gets to the complexity of what we say when we mean being authentic. So I guess what I would say is you just need to be reflective and thoughtful and read the room a little bit, right? Instead of maybe just saying, again, whatever's on your mind or being super transparent with everything that's going on in your life to everybody, start small and maybe start with a group of people and be thoughtful about what everybody else around you is doing, right? So if, you're in a group of people you don't know very well, is that the group of people that you want to really start talking about everything that's going on in your personal life with? Maybe not. Maybe there's another group of people where that's more relevant, or maybe you can start small. But it's that balance that I think is always really, really, really important.
Thank you. And I think we're going to do one more question. So I love this one. What is your next professional goal?
Oh my goodness. Oh, that's a great question. So I have had 5 different roles in 5 different years at American Express over the last 5 years. And so to tell you the truth, my next professional goal is to stay in this current role and get really good at it. And so, I'm looking forward to continuing to be really learning a ton in this role. And then, thinking about what's next and maybe kind of elevating my reach across the global role. I really like finance. I'd like to stay in finance. There's a host of opportunities still available for me at American Express, but I think, continuing to run a global team, continuing to have an impact and broadening my reach beyond just my role, but really thinking about how I can have an impact on the wider company is kind of the next thing on the list. But truthfully, I'm just looking forward to spending more than a year in one role and getting really good at what I'm doing.
Okay. So Rosie, is there any advice you would like to give to anyone struggling with bringing their authentic self to work or finding a sense of belonging?
So maybe just a recap of what we talked about, because I think the questions were so good. First thing, I encourage you to take Damien's advice. He's the CEO of Alpha for a reason. It's great advice. Go back into your life and think about all of the stories, right? What makes you successful? What's important to you? I think that really helps you figure out what authenticity really means to you and what's authentic to you. If you're struggling with being authentic, at work, if you feel like yourself, but you're just having some trouble in an environment that might not accept it, I would say that, focus on some wins. There's nothing like credibility to build authenticity, I think, and find some allies and find some mentors and find people that can give you advice. Find that safe space where you feel really comfortable, where people can help you navigate. Alpha might be that safe space for you. Colleague network might be that safe space for you. Find people that have your back and use that as a launching pad to, be really confident in what you bring to the table.
And I'm just going to add a little bit to that. I would say just be open-minded to feedback, right? Because sometimes, we need to improve and we need to grow, and if we're not growing and changing, then, what's the point? And I personally like to read a lot of books, self-help books, to work on things that, that I need to work on. I think that those are always great tools as well.
That's great. Yeah, I think part of having strong mentors and strong sponsors is getting that feedback that can help you grow as a person.
And then we're gonna ask one question, Reggie. I don't want you to get mad at me. What were the biggest hurdles that you had to overcome when choosing to be authentic and/or political in the workplace? How did you overcome it?
Oh, that's a great question, Reggie. I think it's very similar to what we've been talking about before. I think the biggest hurdles, and it helps that I work, I think, in an environment that really promotes belonging and authenticity, and so I feel very comfortable in the workplace. I think the biggest hurdle for me is always, how do I balance kind of the impact that I want to make, and the higher and higher I get, the more I realize that people actually listen to what I say, right? And so I'm very thoughtful about the impact that I make on the organization while maintaining my own authenticity. And that is constant reflection about what is important to me, how is that going to play to the room, what is important to me, what impact is that going to make on people, and it's a constant back and forth. And so I'm lucky that I work in an environment that, you know, makes me comfortable being my authentic self. I think it's helpful that I've been there for 13 years and I have a number of wins under my belt. But it is still that constant back and forth between how is what I'm going to say land on other people, and how do I make sure that aligns with my values? And I think the more and more you progress in your career and the higher I get, the more that becomes really important, because again, the more I realize that people are actually listening to me.
Thank you, Rosie. Okay, I want to thank everyone for all of their comments and their questions. We really appreciate how engaging you were. So thank you very much for asking questions. I'm going to ask one last question on my end to Rosie. Are there any TV shows, books, or any podcasts that you would recommend?
Oh gosh, oh that's so great. So I've been reading a lot of books lately about government and the history of the U.S. government. I don't remember any of the names, so I can't help you. From a TV perspective, I would love to hear some suggestions in the comment box, because I genuinely feel like I've run out of television. And so I need some suggestions, so I hope that people are sending them in as we speak. Currently, with my husband, we are rewatching Brooklyn Nine-Nine, which is a hilarious show. And in keeping with the theme of this, has not one but two Latina actresses, and not one but two African-American actors. So it's also a very diverse show on television. But that's what we're doing now, although again, I really do feel like I've watched every TV show that has ever been made. So I would love some suggestions in your comment box.
Okay, we'll keep an eye out in the comments box as we wrap it up. And any final thoughts you would like to share with the audience today, Rosie?
Thank you for having me. There's so much passion, there's so much power, there's so much intelligence, there's so much authenticity in this group. You guys are a powerful force, and so I'm really thrilled to be here, and I'm really thrilled to see all of the other great things that Alpha does. So thank you for having me.
And Rosie, thank you for this candid conversation. Thank you for being vulnerable and coming here today. And then thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule and here today. We really, really appreciate it. We appreciate your commitment to the Latino community and to Alpha, and as well American Express. Thank you for being our partner and for supporting the Latino community. With that, we would like to close today's episode. Thank you everyone for joining, and we hope you really enjoyed this conversation. Have a great day.